everybody. It's Carol Marrock at carolmarrock.com. Welcome to Solo and Smart, my YouTube channel. And today I have the honor of interviewing ASHTON APPLEWHITE. And she is a leading voice in an emerging movement dedicated to dismantling ageism and honoring age as a vibrant and necessary aspect of diversity. And ASHTON is the author of This Chair Rocks, a Manifesto Against Ageism. And she is also a TED main stage speaker. She reveals the untapped possibilities of late life in our communities, at work, and in ourselves. Well, welcome, ASHTON.
Thank you, Carol. Great to be here.
I'm really excited because I have known of you for many years because I've been in the senior care industry since 2006 while helping my own parents grow older. And so I know I have followed your career over these, 15, 16 years. So,
yeah, 15 years.
Yeah, so good.
You've been in it since the beginning.
Yeah, pretty much. And I'm still here. Yay. So, we were just talking a minute ago about aging well in America, or aging well, period, no matter where you live. And, that seems to be, we have a kind of a philosophy about it, or maybe a perspective that we all can age well, right? And we all have the capacity to, or the ability to, continue to strive and make money, not necessarily have chronic illnesses, but stay fit. And all of this would just come very easily. And which I think parts of that is good for us, to focus on aging well. However, as a matter of fact, even in my elder orphan group on Facebook, many of the people say, or members say, what the hell? Because,
Sounds about right.
Aging isn't always fun, and it doesn't always bring us wellness and benefits. Sometimes there are some issues we have to deal with. So anyway, I just wanted your thoughts around that term of aging well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is really, really important to challenge this sort of dominant mainstream narrative that everything about aging is awful, and to equate aging with physical and cognitive decline, because that's inaccurate and it fills us with needless fears. So I am not a positive aging Pollyanna. There are real challenges to getting older, whether running out of money, getting sick, ending up alone. And those challenges are real. And I think it's important to say so. Otherwise, we're sort of papering over the scary stuff. And that doesn't do us any favors. A couple of crucial things here. One is that the longer we live, the more different from one another we become. Right? Every newborn is unique, but 17-year-olds have a lot more in common developmentally, physically, socially than 37-year-olds, who are way more homogenous than 57-year-olds, and so on out. Mm-hmm. So the older we are, the less that number says about what we are capable of. And with this idea of, we live in a hyper-capitalist, youth-obsessed society that broadcasts this message that to age well or age successfully is my least favorite phrase. Why should aging be something we succeed or fail at? We don't succeed or fail at childhood, or adolescence, or we all fail at adolescence, right? So, and that standard is to continue to look and move like younger versions of yourself. And that is possible to some degree for some of us, but it's not possible ever in the long term. And so it sets us up to fail. It makes us compete, walk in the room, who looks better, who moves better. It sets us up to sort of distance ourselves from our peers who might not be so gosh darn successful at some piece of this, and that's awful. We want to have compassion for each other and age in community, regardless of what piece of somebody happens to be falling apart faster than someone else. That said, there are only two inevitable bad things about getting older. You're going to lose people you've known all your life, and some part of your body is going to fall apart. And when we pretend that's not the case or additionally stigmatize that, we just make things harder. We age well, not by avoiding these things. Even the wealthy among us can purchase the supports that make it seem like maybe they're not experiencing these things as fast or as publicly as we are, but money doesn't protect you against everything, right? Far from it. We age well, not by avoiding chronic illness. No one can avoid bad luck, but by adapting. So I think it's really important not to think in terms of boundaries, healthy, unhealthy, mobile, immobility. Immobility is relative. Health is relative. We all, and we each inhabit somewhere different on each of those planes. And also, just one more point, I know this is a long answer, but aging well to me might be very different from aging well to you. If you are an athlete, it might be a terrible loss that you can't ski a really steep slope anymore or play tennis. I never skied fast slopes. I was never a tennis player, but I might miss something more terribly than you do, right? So there is no right way to age well. And we each, we do it best by acknowledging that things are going to change, by thinking about them in advance if we can, rather than just pretending that they never will. And then not by feeling like we are failures when things do change.
Well said. I'm a huge proponent of planning ahead, or at least looking ahead.
Exactly.
And there's
talk about it. Just talk about it. And when you talk about it, it becomes less fearsome.
Right.
Not more. Everyone dreads these conversations, but the minute you talk about it, you're like, oh, wow, this is not some monstrous dragon. This is a tactical, strategic, philosophical. It's a big thing, but we can nibble away at little bits of it.
Absolutely. When I was looking back, when I was helping both my parents, I got a clear picture of what aging can look like. And that reflected to me, well, okay, that I could potentially face the same things they're facing right now. So how am I going to deal with it? What are some of the things right now that I can start planning ahead of time, or at least thinking ahead of time of how to prepare for that? That doesn't mean I'm going to solve anything, or
it'll be different for you. You're not the same as they are.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We have this idea that if you use a cane or you're in a wheelchair, even bedbound, the quality of your life must be awful. Ask that person, because we project all our fears onto that person. And, it's very different lived from the inside. It is. I met a ethicist at Johns Hopkins a long time ago on a journalism fellowship, and a gerontologist also. And his mantra was a Mexican saying that the appearance of the bull changes once you enter the ring, right? The bull looks different to the matador than it does to the spectators. And which I shortened to the bull looks different. We don't, and it's psychologists call it the psychologist fallacy. We can't know what any other human being is experiencing. And because we all, to some degree, because we're human, and to a huge degree because we live in an ageist and ableist culture, right, that stigmatizes aging and disability, when we see the proverbial little old lady, don't say I said that, but hobbling across the street, clutching her walker, and we think, oh, poor thing, and nobody wants pity, believe me, maybe she's going off to meet her boyfriend, right? We don't know. So check the human tendency to think that her quality of life must be lower than we think it is because the bull looks different.
Right. Who knows? Maybe she's out there. She's about to rob a bank.
Exactly. And no one actually wants to be any younger. There's that. Think about that. We might want to swap out the battered bits, but we know no matter how trepidatious we are, that what we have learned and done over the years is precious and makes us who we are.
Yes, I agree. Well, which kind of brings me to a question that one of the members have for you, members in my group, and she asked how to get seniors to kick that habit of owning negative stereotypes of aging. She says, I'm so tired of older people saying they're having a senior moment.
Yeah.
When they misplace things. I mean, geez, I've been misplacing things since I was 30 years old. So
Yes.
it's true.
It is a line of mine. I realized I stopped saying it. I used to think it was kind of cute to joke about senior moments. But I realized when I lost the car keys in high school, I didn't call it a junior moment, right? So that member of your group hits on the essential starting point for all of us. With one qualifier, we can't make anybody else do anything. If I could make people aware of their internalized ageism, there would be no more ageism in the world. The person has to be ready to do that first step, which is the hardest of all, which is to acknowledge that we are all biased. One of the most, I started this 15 years ago, indeed, without knowing much of anything about the subject. And one of the many things that like whacked me over the head was learning and realizing that older people can be the most ageist of all, because we have had 50, 60, 70, 80 years of being barraged by negative messages about aging, about capacity, about ability. And unless we stop to challenge them, they become part of our identity. And that's what's going on when older people think, oh, gee, I can't, when we blame, an ache and pain or pain on age or an incapacity on age, might have something to do with it, probably doesn't. Your back probably hurts because you cooked dinner for 10 people, or you lifted a, heavy box or whatever. Age, or, did those people not want to, talk to me because, I'm old, or, we make age into a bigger thing than it is. So the most important first step is to look honestly at our own attitudes towards age and aging. And then but the good news is that the minute you start to see it in yourself, because we are all biased, we are all ageist, no one is free of it, then you start to see it in the world around you. You start to see it in those comments, that people make. You see it in birthday cards, you see it in advertising. And it's aggravating if you're someone like me, but it is also liberating, because then you see it in the culture at large and you're like, oh, I didn't make this up. It's not my problem. It's not a problem I created, right? It is a social and economic issue that we can come together and do something about. And that is really liberating. So I'm thrilled that your friend has asked this question. She's clearly, or he has embarked on this path already. And there are a million tools and ways to go about it. Show people my TED Talk, have a reading group and talk about my book, or lots of, there are lots of other books. I want to direct your listeners your watchers to the Old School Anti-Ageism Clearinghouse. I'm sure you'll put the link in the YouTube thing. oldschool.info. Hundreds of free, except the books. The books are not free. Everything else is free. Tools, videos, workshops, animations, language guides, something for everyone that gives a way in to thinking about how ageism works between your ears and in the world around us, so you could get started in any way that makes sense for you.
Wonderful. I have visited your website, and it's a plethora of great information.
I mean, my website is thischairrocks.com.
Yes.
And I have been thinking out loud there for almost 15 years. And I also, you can get from thischairrocks.com or on its own to another site that I started called Yo, Is This Ageist?, where people can submit things they've seen or heard or maybe said or themselves to ask me whether or not they are ageist. That's a very lighthearted starting point for conversations.
Good.
Pick something that you don't agree with or that you never thought of before, and just bring it up. I guarantee that it will provoke an interesting conversation, because we're only starting as a
Yeah.
culture to think about these things.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know about that. As a matter of fact, I'll post that link as well.
Great, thanks.
And if someone wants to know about organized forces like organizations here in the US, national ones that oppose ageism, you know, besides AARP, are there other organizations? You just mentioned one, your oldschool.info, I think.
Yeah, I mean, by all means, old school, when we started it in 2017, it was really just a static repository. I mean, always growing. And we are starting now to organize events. We develop our own workshops and consciousness raising guides, all of which are free for download. So do sign up for the Old School newsletter. We won't spam you and we won't give it away if you want to see what we're up to. Same goes for my newsletter, only I don't write one very often. Old School has an organizations session. I will say that I do not think AARP is very useful on the ageism front. Their legal department does terrific work about ageism in the workforce, but you will find organizations in the U.S. And around the world that are having, when we started Old School, there was no campaigns section at all. And now it's one of our fastest growing. So various cities have anti-ageism campaigns that you can join. San Francisco and New York, notably. There's all these funky towns in Great Britain that are doing things. There's an age-friendly initiative that started with the World Health Organization, and tons of organizations are doing, tons of cities, municipalities. If you Google Colorado, there's an organization called Changing the Narrative Colorado that is doing, they just did this fantastic anti-ageist birthday card campaign. And they are really, if you yourself are an organizer, see what they're doing there, because it is replicable in other states. So again, huge job, a zillion ways at it and a million ways in.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, because a lot of the members in the group are very active.
Fantastic.
And yes, so great. Good tips. Thank you. Let's see. Here's another one. It seems that older citizens have been taken out of society. And what can we personally do to make us feel as if we're, you know, part of community again?
Well, that's a hard one to answer, because I can't put myself in the shoes of the person who is asking the question. It is, I think, first of all, we can, as the saying goes, we can only change ourselves, or that's where all change begins. So to think about whether, if you feel taken out of society, look at the forces that are behind that. If it is in the most literal sense, perhaps because you are wheelchair bound and you live somewhere that is not wheelchair accessible, that is a specific set of problems that we have, actually, because of the Americans with Disabilities Act, legal ways to enforce access. If you feel that you are not visible as an older woman because of the way sexism and ageism combine, think about where those forces come from. There are so many conversations emerging now around women and aging, older women who are saying, no, I'm not going to be silenced and shut up, women going gray and putting, and doing so, proudly and posting all about it. Women younger than those women typically, but not necessarily, women talking about going through menopause. Menopause used to be a totally taboo subject. So find your tribe and figure out what way you want to bring that change forward in your own life. I mean, when a group is silenced, when we are quiet about the fact that we are aging, and we are encouraged to be quiet about it all the time because we're supposed to be ashamed about the fact that we wake up a day older, then so are the issues that affect us. So I think, to the degree that you can, identify as older and ask why, starting between your ears, about why should I be ashamed of that? Why should I hide it?
Yeah, I agree. I think it starts with us, with me personally, and with everyone else personally.
It does. And if you can set an example without, without finger wagging. I mean, I'm learning to be less judgmental all the time. I think the best thing we can do is just try and set an example. Another phrase that it occurred to me you might find useful, it's in my book, is one I appropriated from a geriatrician called Joanne Lynn, who called herself an old person in training. And it refers to exactly that process you described about looking after your parents. It's as simple, sort of, as acknowledging that we're going to get older, that we might even be old, right? And that older you can be, I've had a long time to get used to that idea. We are conditioned to resist it like crazy. No judgment. That older you can be a speck on the horizon, a million miles away. But if we acknowledge that we will become that older person someday, if we're lucky, then you don't get sucked into this hamster wheel of denial and pretending it's not going to happen. And it enables us to look at and listen to the older people around us instead of acting like they're some other, strange species from another land, both to see the ways in which older people behave that you think are great and things that they do that you really don't want to emulate, right? I mean, some old people are wise. Lots of older people don't seem to have learned a thing along the way, right? But what is it then, what is it that makes the older person's wiser? What is it that in their lives makes it seem that they are adapting to and content in their circumstances?
Yes. I'm fortunate to I live in a high rise, and I have several individuals or residents that are in their late 80s and 90s. And a few of them go to the Y every day. They go swimming. They have lunch with friends. They're always out and about. And it's like, yeah, that's my role model. She's my role model, So I think it's great.
It's great, but keep in mind too, that there might be a point at which, for whatever reason, they aren't able to do that anymore. And that's not, we shouldn't judge them for that, right? I mean, it's hard not to, because we, especially in the US, really validate and valorize like independence. No one is independent ever.
Yeah.
But, it takes luck to be able to stay active. It takes a strong social network. The most important component of a good old age is not health. It's not wealth. It's having a solid social network. So I'm guessing that if one of those people, got sick or hurt herself and couldn't go out of her apartment, you'd knock on her door and see how she was doing. And that's the best possible thing you can do for her. And of course, if it happens to you, she's going to come knocking on your door. So, and that is what sustains us all along the life course. It's why to be ruthlessly pragmatic, it's why it's a really, really good thing to make friends of all ages, to think of things that you like to do and find mixed age groups to do it in, not only so you don't outlive all your friends to be kind of cold-hearted about it, but also when just like if you have friends that are of all sexual orientations, it's a lot harder to be homophobic. It's a lot harder to hold on to stereotypes, right? And when we have friends of all ages, it's pretty hard to hold on to negative or positive stereotypes about older or younger people. And I also think that younger people have a lot to benefit from it, because we do live in a really age segregated society. But if younger people hang out around older people who are enjoying being older, which most of us do, then it makes aging less fearful and helps younger people realize how much of our youth we squander on worrying about getting older in a way that isn't helpful and isn't fact-based.
Yeah, I agree. Totally. And I especially agree and love the idea that you promote social connection. And absolutely. And that's what's
one area where women have an advantage, because we do tend to be the curators of social relationships, and we do talk, we do network. So that's something that men maybe need to work a little harder on.
Yes, yes. And this question I thought was interesting. It's about screening professionals for ageism. And she's thinking of like physicians, physical therapists, mental health therapists that may have, how do you screen for those that might have a mindset or a predetermined mindset for ageism? Do you think
Yeah.
that's possible?
Anything is possible. One of the resources on Old School is the Harvard Implicit Bias Test, which I urge everyone to take. They have them for all kinds of prejudices, but it's a multiple choice thing, and you go through it and you discover almost inevitably that, yeah, you're ageist. So you might try and get your physical therapist or whoever it is to take the test. I would think, though, that most of us can rely on our own sort of personal antenna. Is the person looking you in the eye? Is the person looking, there's a ton of ageism in healthcare. And one thing that a dead giveaway, I am so embarrassed that my phone is ringing. I cannot tell you. I'm sorry. Dead giveaway is when, especially in a healthcare setting, the practitioner speaks to the younger person who is with the older person instead of directly to the older person. Another dead giveaway is if a healthcare professional says, "What do you expect at your age?" Because I just happen to have a total shoulder replacement on my left side 2 weeks ago. But so something's going to fall apart. In me, it's my bones, but shoulder replacements are pretty rare, relatively speaking. My other shoulder is holding up just fine. So this is an example of how the way in which each of us experiences the physical and social and cognitive changes that accompany aging for some of us happen at different rates in different ways. And I'm probably going to adapt to that better than someone who used to really, really rely on their overhand, whose overhand is probably not going to be what it was. I had the operation because of arthritis pain, and my pain is going to go away. So the way in which we adapt is, again, totally individual.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. Another individual coming from a member is she wanted to volunteer at a wildlife rehab. And, and there's so much that goes with, as you know, discrimination and ageism in the workplace.
A lot.
And gosh, and I get it, because it seemed like the day I turned 60, I don't think anyone ever looked at my resume again, it seems.
I'm so sorry. It's so wasteful and so punishing.
It is.
So stupid and so destructive
It
to
is.
people's identities, not to mention, if you can't pay your rent, what else, what else you don't have anything else to focus on, and if your bills aren't getting paid.
I know, it's horrific.
It's
so
horrific.
Do you have any tips, and in your website, probably oldschool.info might have some tips around handling, discrimination, or special age discrimination when we're looking for a job, or at least a part-time.
There is all sorts of stuff if you search for work. I also think that the plain old straight up internet is a really good, because people are becoming more aware of ageism, because there is more interest these days on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes.
Because finally, hallelujah, people are starting to realize that age is a criterion for diversity. Hello. Because companies are starting to get sued for age discrimination and losing, all these things are bumping age and age discrimination into the forefront. So there are tons of articles out there from people with frontline hiring and HR experience, which I don't have, right? So who can give you, really, I can try and remember some, but you might as well look at the 62 articles that will pop up, which might be tailored to the industry, that you want to, enter or re-enter, whatever. I will say that because I am embarked on this effort to change the culture at a broad level, that sometimes that advice consists of, fudging your age, maybe leaving early accomplishments off your resume. If you have rent to pay, no judgment. Do what you got to do. No judgment. But as long as we are doing those things, we are reinforcing the idea that to age is shameful, right? We're hiding the thing rather than foregrounding that. The age doesn't need to be foregrounded either. It's part of your identity, the way whether you were born in Peoria and your whole life experience, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, all of these are pieces of who we are that belong in the mosaic. But age is so much less relevant than class, than gender, than all these other things that shape our experience and capacity, that shape who we are in the world. So I wish that resumes and dating sites, for that matter, would be age blind, and medical charts. It belongs in there, but it doesn't belong on the front page.
Yeah.
Right. So if you do think you are being discriminated against at work, take notes on it, report it to HR if you can. If you don't dare peep because you're afraid you're going to lose your job, no judgment. But until all of us, more and more of us, speak up about it, as long as we are papering it over, it's not good for us, because it's rooted in shame about something that shouldn't be shameful. And it gives a pass to the discrimination that makes those behaviors necessary.
Yes. Well, thank you, Ashton. Thank you for bringing this really tough topic to the forefront.
It's a great topic, though. If you had told me all those years ago that I would be fascinated by aging, I would have said, ew, why do I want to spend my time thinking about something scary and depressing? I started thinking about it because I was in my mid-50s, and I realized I was really apprehensive. And being sort of a nerdy, researchy person, I started researching and learned in 30 seconds, literally a matter of months, that everything I thought I knew was way off base or flat out wrong. And aging is not just something sad and annoying old people do. It's how we move through life, and it's incredibly interesting and rich, and it's here to stay. More of us are living longer than ever before, and that is a permanent global demographic trend and a triumph of human history, public health. It's fantastic.
So maybe instead of seeing it as a negative, something bad happening to us, we should see, well, what kind of opportunities are there for me here?
It's both. It's both. There are real challenges, but we need to frame it as, how do we address the challenges, as we started by acknowledging that they exist, by not stigmatizing them, and by talking about them in advance, so that we're not having that conversation around the kitchen table at midnight, but discussing what we think we might want. And I don't mean about when something hideous happens, but about moving, about safety proofing your house. If your house is filled with little slippery rugs, maybe it's time. We have this sort of idea that we can just keep everything the same. Nothing stays the same. And think what a boring world we would live in if that were the case.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, it's just think about our own self-care. Absolutely. Well, again, thanks, Ashton. Is there one insight or one something that you might want to leave with our audience that I failed to ask about?
No, I think we touched on a lot of the basics. Really the crucial thing to start with looking at your own attitudes towards age and aging, because it's uncomfortable to realize how many of these negative messages we have internalized, and how much we blame on age when age typically has nothing to do with it. But once we do that, and unlearning is not easy, then liberation. There's in my nerdy universe, there's actually a phrase. It's called cognitive liberation, where you realize these are not personal problems or personal failings. These are social and political issues that we can come together and do something about, especially in a world where millions of us are living longer than ever before. It is not okay for people who are no longer young, which is half of humanity, a minimum, right? Especially if you think, depends on where you think people stop being young. Cosmetics industries think you stop being young at about 22. Right? So wherever and of course there's no line, but do we really want to age in a world that treats us like second-class citizens?
No,
I don't.
No, not at all. I felt like I lived as a second-class citizen back in the 80s when I was working in technology as the most of the time as the only woman on a team.
Yeah, and that's a double whammy, of course. And all these, ageism is a tremendous it's often the first form of discrimination that white men encounter, which is interesting. So I'm counting on some of y'all to join the cause. But of course, for women, there's the double whammy that you just described. If you're a woman of color, it's triple obstacles. If you have a disability, if you're an immigrant, if you don't speak the languages fluently, all those things are held against us.
Absolutely. Gosh, so much to think about, so much to do about, or to take the opportunity to do about.
But activism is intersectional too, right? When we chip away at any form of bias, we chip away at the fear and ignorance that underlies them all. Great.
Well said, because I'm chipping away of the ignorance about solo agers.
It's really important. And I think, I think what you're doing is important. And I think you're getting help, at least I like to imagine, from the LGBTQ community, which has radically revised our idea of family as limited to biological, heterosexual, monogamous, married, white picket fence, stuff. We are it's a time of enormous change.
Yes.
And we have an incredible opportunity here, because our rituals, our institutions evolved when lives were shorter. And it's up to us to create institutions and rituals and family structures. Family structures that are not defined by biology, obviously, that support us across these longer lives and support us when we're young too, right? Ageism is any judgment on the basis of age, including you're too young, right? And we need support for the interdependent lives we all lead from birth to death.
Wow, you certainly leave us with a lot of great information and things to think about, things that will, prompt us in hopefully us, changing our own perspectives around the people, about the people that we live around in our own communities. So
and
great.
When you shift your awareness, your energy changes, and that in itself, even in ways we're not aware of, changes the world around us.
Yes, we need a lot of change. Well, thank you, Ashton, and thank you, viewers, for visiting today. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel and circle back in the next day or two and listen to this video again and again, because Ashton certainly leaves us with a lot of reminders and a lot of ways that we can look at ourselves and hopefully make changes within. Thank you again.
My pleasure.